Good evening, and welcome to the Way of Salvation Christian Church presents the one-year Chronological Bible 365-day reading plan brought to you by Tyndale House Publishers. I am Minister Jewett Peterson, and today is February 10th, 2024. We are in the evening of the seventh day of the week, which is Sabbath. Happy Sabbath to you. And it is 11:32 p.m. And we'll be reading from day 145 of our plan in the King James Version of the Bible, the KJV. And day 145 consists of 2 Chronicles 8, 1 Kings chapter 9, verses 15 through 28, 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 through 13, 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verses 1 through 12, 1 Kings chapters 10, verses 14 through 29, and 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verses 13 through 28, and 2 Chronicles chapter 1, verses 14 through verses 14 through 17. And we'll be starting off in 2 Chronicles chapter 8, starting at verse 1 in the King James Version. First section is Solomon's reign. Verse 1, and it came to pass at the end of 20 years, wherein Solomon had built the house of the Lord and his own house, that the cities which Hiram had restored to Solomon, Solomon built them and caused the children of Israel to dwell there. And Solomon went to Hamath Zobah and prevailed against it. And he built Tadmor and the wilderness and all the store cities, which he built in Hamath. Also, he built Beth Horon, the upper, and Beth Horon, the nether, fenced cities with walls, gates, and bars, and Baalath, and all the store cities that Solomon had, and all the chariot cities, and the cities of the horsemen, and all that Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem and in Lebanon and throughout all the land of his dominion. As for all the people that were left of the Hittites and the Amorites and Perizzites and Hivites and the Jebusites, which were not of Israel, but of their children, who were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel consumed not, them did Solomon make to pay tribute unto this day. But of the children of Israel did Solomon make no servants for his work, but they were men of war and chief of his captains and captains of his chariots and horsemen. And these were the chief of King Solomon's officers, even 250 that bear rule over the people. And Solomon brought up the daughter of Pharaoh out of the city of David unto the house that he had built for her. For he said, my wife shall not dwell in the house of David, king of Israel, because the places are holy, whereunto the ark of the Lord have come. Then Solomon offered burnt offerings unto the Lord on the altar of the Lord, which he had built before the porch, even after a certain rate every day, offering according to the commandment of Moses, on the Sabbaths and on the new moons and on the solemn feasts 3 times in the year, even in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles. And he appointed, according to the order of David his father, the courses of the priests to their service, and the Levites to their charges, to praise and minister before the priests, as the duty of every day required. The porters also by their courses at every gate, for so had David, the man of God, commanded. And they departed not from the commandment of the king unto the priests and Levites concerning any matter or concerning the treasures. Now all the work of Solomon was prepared until the day of the foundation of the house of the Lord, and until it was finished, so the house of the Lord was perfected. Then went Solomon to Ezion, Geber, and to Eloth at the seaside in the land of Edom. And Hiram sent him by the hands of his servants, ships and servants that had knowledge of the sea, And they went with the servants of Solomon to Ophir, and took thence 450 talents of gold, and brought them to King Solomon. Next section will be 1 Kings chapter 9. We'll be starting at verse 15. And this is the reason of the Levi, which King Solomon raised, for to build the house of the Lord and his own house, and Milo, and the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, and Megiddo, and Gezer. For Pharaoh, king of Egypt, have gone up and taken Gezer, and burnt it with fire, and slain the Canaanites that dwelt in the city, and given it for a present unto his daughter, Solomon's wife. And Solomon built Gezer, and Beth-horon, the nether, and Baalath, and Tadmor, and the wilderness, and the land, and all the cities of store that Solomon had, and cities for his chariots, and cities for his horsemen, and that which Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem, and in Lebanon, and in all the land of his dominion. And all the people that were left of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which were not of the children of Israel, their children that were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel also were not able utterly to destroy, upon those did Solomon levy a tribute of bond service unto this day. But of the children of Israel did Solomon make no bondmen. But they were men of war, and his servants, and his princes, and his captains, and his rulers of his chariots, and his horsemen. These were the chief of the officers that were over Solomon's work, 550, which bear rule over the people that wrought in the work. Verse 24. But Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city of David unto her house, which Solomon had built for her. Then did he build Millo. And 3 times in a year did Solomon offer burnt offerings and peace offerings upon the altar, which he built unto the Lord. And he burnt incense upon the altar that was before the Lord. So he finished the house. And King Solomon made a navy of ships in Ezion Geber, which is besides Eloth, on the shore of the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. And Hiram sent in the navy, his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. And they came to Ophir, and fetched and thence gold 420 talents, and brought it to King Solomon. Next section will be 1 Kings chapter 10, starting at verse 1. And when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to prove him with hard questions. And she came to Jerusalem with a very great train, with camels and bare spices, and very much gold and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart. And Solomon told her all her questions. There was not anything hid from the king, which he told her not. And when the queen of Sheba had seen all Solomon's wisdom, and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, and his cupbearers, and his accent by which he went up unto the Lord, unto the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Verse 6, and she said to the king, it was a true report that I heard in mine own land of thy acts and of thy wisdom. Howbeit, I believed not the words until I came, and mine eyes have seen it. And behold, the half was not told to me. Thy wisdom and prosperity exceedeth the fame which I heard. Happy are thy men, happy are these thy servants, which stand continually before thee, and that hear thy wisdom. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighted in thee, to set thee on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loved Israel forever. Therefore made he thee king to do judgment and justice. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, and of spices very great store, and precious stones. There came no more such abundance of spices as these, which the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. And the navy also of Hiram, that brought gold from Ophir, brought in from Ophir great plenty of almug trees and precious stones. And the king made of the almug trees pillars for the house of the Lord, and for the king's house, harps also, and psalteries for singers. There came no such almug tree, nor were seen unto this day. And King Solomon gave unto the queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, because that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty, besides that which Solomon gave of her of his royal bounty. So she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. Next section will be 2 Chronicles chapter 9, starting at verse 1. And when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to prove Solomon with her questions at Jerusalem, with a very great company, and camels that bear spices, and gold in abundance, and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart. And Solomon told her all her questions, and there was nothing hid from Solomon which he told her not. And when the queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, his cupbearers also, and their apparel, and his accent by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. And she said to the king, it was a true report which I have heard in mine own land of thine acts and of thy wisdom. Howbeit, I believed not their words until I came, and mine eyes have seen it. And behold, the one half of the greatness of thy wisdom was not told me, for thou exceedeth the fame that I heard. Happy are thy men, and happy are these thy servants, which stand continually before thee, and hear thy wisdom. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighteth in thee, to set thee on his throne, to be king for the Lord thy God, because thy God loved Israel, to establish them forever. Therefore made he the king over them, to do judgment and justice. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, and of spices great abundance, and precious stones. Neither was there any such spice as the queen of Sheba gave King Solomon. And the servants also of Hiram, and the servants of Solomon, which brought gold from Ophir, brought algum trees and precious stones. And the king made of algum trees terraces to the house of the Lord, and to the king's palace, and harps and psalteries for singers. And there were none such seen before in the land of Judah. And King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all her desire, whatever she asked, beside that which she had brought unto the king. So she turned and went away to her own land, she and her servants. Next section will be 1 Kings chapter 10, starting at verse 14. 1 Kings chapter 10, starting at verse 14. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 606 talents of gold. Beside that, he had of the merchantmen and of the traffic of the spice merchants, and of all the kings of Arabia, and of the governors of the country, and King Solomon made 200 targets of beaten gold. 600 shekels of gold went to one target, and he made 300 shekels of beaten gold. 3 pounds of gold went to one shield. Excuse me. Went to one shield, and the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with the best gold. The throne had steps. The throne had 6 steps. And the top of the throne was round behind, and there were stays on either side on the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside and 12 and 2 lions stood beside the stays. Verse 20, and 12 lions stood there on the one side, and on the other upon the 6 steps. There was not the like made in any kingdom. What? I'm going to read verse 20 again. And 12 lions stood there on the one side, and on the other side, and on the other upon the 6 steps. There was not the like made in any kingdom. And all King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon, for the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. So King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and for wisdom, and all the earth sought to Solomon to hear his wisdom. Each God put in his heart, and they brought every man his present, vessels of silver and vessels of gold, and garments and armor and spices, horses and mules of rate year by year. And Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the cities of chariots and with the king of Jerusalem. And the king made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones, and cedars made he to be as the sycamore trees that were in the value for advance. And we're going to read verse 27 again. And the king made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar made he to be as the sycamore trees that are in the vale for 100. And Solomon had horses brought out of Egypt, and linen yarn. The king's merchant received the linen. The king's merchants received the linen yarn at a price. And a chariot came up and went out of Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. And so far, all the kings are on the right place. Verse 29. And the chariot came up and went out of Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150 miles. And so for all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Syria did they. We're going to read 29 again. And a chariot came up and went out of Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. And so for all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Syria did they bring them out by their means. Next section is 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verses 13. Now the weight, starting at 13, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 603 score and 6 talents of gold. Besides that, with every chapman and besides that, verse 14, beside that, which chapmen and merchants brought all the kings of Arabia and governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. And King Solomon made 200 targets of beaten gold. 600 shekels of beaten gold went to one target, and 300 shields made he of beaten gold. 300 shekels of gold went to one shield, and the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold, and there were 6 steps to the throne, with the footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne, and stays on each side of the sitting place, and 2 lions standing by the stays. And 12 lions stood there on the one side, and on the other side upon the 6 steps. We're going to have to read 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 13. Now the weight of gold, starting at verse 13, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 603 score and 6 talents of gold. Beside that, which chapmen and merchants brought, and all the kings of Arabia and governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. And King Solomon made 200 targets of beaten gold. 600 shekels of beaten gold went to one target, and 300 shields made he of beaten gold. 300 shekels of gold went to one shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold, and there were 6 steps to the throne, with the footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne, and stays on each side of the sitting place, and 2 lions standing by the stays. And 12 lions stood there on the one side, and on the other side upon the 6 steps there, and upon the 6 steps. There was not the like made in any kingdom. And all the drinking vessels of King Solomon were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was not anything counted of in the days of Solomon, for the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram. Every 3 years once came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver and ivory and apes and peacocks. And King Solomon passed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom, and all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom that God had put in his heart. And they brought every man his present, vessels of silver and vessels of gold, and raiment, harness and spices, horses and mules, a rate year by year. And Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the chariot cities, and with the king of Jerusalem. And he reigned over all the kings from the river even unto the land of the Philistines, and to the border of Egypt. And the king made silver in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar trees made he as sycamore trees that are in the low plains in abundance. And they brought unto Solomon horses out of Egypt, and out of all the land. And next section will be 2 Chronicles chapter 1, starting at verse 14. And Solomon gathered chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, which he placed in the chariot cities, and with the king at Jerusalem. And the king made silver and gold at Jerusalem as plenteous as stones, and cedar trees made he as the sycamore tree that are in the vale for distance, for abundance, that are in the vale for abundance. Verse 16. And Solomon had horses brought out of Egypt in linen yarn. The king's merchants received the linen yarn at a price, and they fetched up and brought forth out of Egypt a chariot for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for an hundred and an horse for 150. And so brought they out horses for all the kings of the Hittites and for the kings of Syria by their means. May the Lord add a rich and bountiful blessing to the reading, hearing, and doing of his word. Thank you for joining me. Be blessed.